Now we've seen how content negotiation plays a role with the Web API, and of course that influences how we return data to the client. We no longer return action results or view results from these methods, we just return objects, and the content negotiation algorithm and the formatters, they all step in and serialize the object into the media type the client wants. So that's a little different. And what's also different is how we map incoming data into parameters in an action method. I've already shown you that we can get a simple integer ID parameter into an action method, and we did that when we went to /API/videos/5 with a GET request. The 5 represented an ID, and we ended up in the action taking an ID parameter, and the value was 5. So by default, the Web API assumes that primitive types, like integers and strings, it assumes they'll be somewhere in the request, and it's going to go looking for them, but it's not going to look in the HTTP message body. Otherwise, it's like normal MVC model binding in the sense that the runtime will look in the query string, and it'll look in route data. That's where it found our ID parameter when we did /video/5, and it converts that value and passes it into the action. But it's not going to look in the message body. If you want to pass a primitive type in the message body, there's an attribute you need to use to tell the Web API to look in the body, and that is the FromBody attribute. Complex types, on the other hand, the Web API assumes they will be in the HTTP message body, like the body of a POST request or the body of a PUT request. POST, by the way, is generally used to update a resource. If we want to update a video, we could post to the Video API controller, while PUT is generally used to create a new resource. And of course, GET is to read and delete is to destroy. I'll show you examples of all these in just a bit. But this is a significant difference from MVC, where you could bind any sort of model. Web API expects a single complex model in the body, and the content type of the body will decide how to serialize the message body. So those formatters, the JSON formatter, the XML formatter, the form URL encoded formatter, they will look in the HTTP message body, and when the client says, hey, I'm posting you JSON, they'll try to deserialize JSON. The JSON formatter will jump in and try to turn that into the object, the complex object that you expect in your method. Let's experiment with all this a bit. Let's use curl to fire off a couple more requests to this GET method that takes an ID parameter just to see how it behaves. And we already know that this request is going to succeed, /API/videos/5. If I issue that, we get back a response that basically says it found the value 5. It put the value in the response. And the reason that works is because of our route configuration. We told the MVC runtime when you see something like API/something/something else to treat that something else as the ID. So that particular piece of the URL gets placed in route data, and then when the MVC runtime sees that there is an action method available that needs an ID parameter, it's able to find it in route data, convert it into an integer, and pass it into us. But this also works if I don't pass it in the URL, but if I pass it in the query string. So there we get value 12. So it's looking in the query string. It's also looking in route data. And that's another area of extensibility in the MVC framework if you want it to go off and look other places too. But I'd like to turn our attention now to the post method, because eventually we're going to need to update videos, so it would be nice if we could post a video and make sure that we get the proper value back. We're going to try this with just a string first. So let me come into curl and say that the method now is post. And this particular method right now doesn't need an ID parameter, so I'm going to take that away. But I am going to pass data. So that's done with -d. And with data, typically you're providing form data. So form data usually looks like value equals Scott, and pass that along. But we got a null value back. And there's actually two reasons for that, unfortunately. The first reason is that what the Web API expects for a single primitive parameter is just equals Scott. That will get it in value, but it's not going to look into the message body. That equals Scott goes into the message body until I add that attribute from body. And now let me do a build, and let me send off the request. And now you can see we pull that value out. And let's look at it one more time with the -v. And let me open up this window a little bit so that we can see that what curl did was, first of all, sent off that post to /API/videos, said that the content type was application/X form encoded, That means that the form URL encoded formatter jumped into play. It looked in the message body, it pulled that value out. Now you might think that that syntax is just a little bit quirky, the fact that I had to say equals Scott and not value equals Scott, but don't worry, because when you start working with actual complex types, this works the way you would expect it. So just to do a real quick test, let's go ahead and create a video class. And let's say that this class has an ID, and let's say that every video also has a title. And now let's go to the post method, and instead of taking a primitive type, we'll take a video parameter, and I will return that video parameter just so we can see what comes out from curl, and put it here too. And I think I'll just need to make that a public class so that the C# compiler is happy, but I should be able to do a build. And now I can come down and let's do a post that says ID equals 1. And you can see we got back a JSON representation of a video with the ID property set to 1. So we got the ID through there. And I can also say n title equals MVC4. And we got that video back. So hopefully this is giving you some idea of how a web API will work. When someone calls get or get all videos, what we're going to do is just return objects. We're going to let the content negotiation work to determine the best format for the client, the best representation of that resource, and we can also receive data the same way. A client wants to post a new video or post to update a video to our web service, we can just take a complex type as a parameter, as a video, and the formatters and the pipeline of the web API will figure out how to take form encoded data or JSON encoded data or XML encoded data and turn that into an object for us, and then it's just up to us to do the work of saving things in the database and so forth. That's what we're going to take a look at next.